All right, so have you ever noticed this thing, like when you're watching a movie and you know something bad is about to happen?
Oh, yeah.
Like the music is swelling and the character's walking into a dark room
Yeah.
and you just know something's going to jump out, but you're still like totally on the edge of your seat, even if you've seen the movie 100 times.
Totally, totally. It's like, why am I still scared? I know the monster's about to pop out.
Exactly. That's actually a really interesting philosophical puzzle. It's called the paradox of suspense. Basically, how can we feel suspense if we already know the outcome?
It is a bit of a head scratcher. I mean, you'd think the suspense relies on uncertainty, right?
Yeah.
The not knowing.
Yeah.
But somehow, even when we know, we still get that feeling.
Yeah, like rewatching a favorite thriller. You
Yeah.
know the hero's going to make it, but you're still biting your nails during the chase scene.
Exactly. So we've been digging into the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy because some really smart people have been trying to figure this out for a while. And get this, understanding this paradox actually helps us understand how we connect with stories and why certain stories just grab us and don't let go.
So this isn't just hope that things will turn out okay.
Right. But here's the key. The third piece is uncertainty.
Yeah.
You genuinely can't know which way it's going to go. Fear, hope, and not knowing. That's the suspense cocktail.
Okay, so can you give us like a real world example of this? Something beyond just watching a movie?
Sure, imagine walking alone at night down a dark street, a place that maybe doesn't feel totally safe.
Yeah, I can picture it.
You'd probably feel some fear, right? Because there's a chance something bad could happen. But you'd also hope that you get home safe. And the whole time, you're uncertain. You don't know if anything will actually happen. That mix of fear, hope, and not knowing is what creates the suspense in that situation.
So the more dangerous the street feels, the more intense that suspense would be.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
Ortney, Clore, and Collins even say that the stronger the fear and the hope, the stronger the suspense. Like if you're walking through a really bad neighborhood and you're really afraid of getting mugged, the suspense is going to be way more intense than if you're just walking through a quiet park.
Right, it's all about the stakes.
Yep. But here's the thing. This standard account is very clear. Without uncertainty, you can't have suspense. And that's where things get tricky when we talk about stories.
Yeah, because if we're going by that definition, how can we still feel suspense when we're watching a movie for the 10th time? We already know what's going to happen.
Right. That's the paradox. And it's usually presented as these three statements that seem to contradict each other. Number one, suspense needs uncertainty. Number two, knowing the ending takes away the uncertainty. And number three, we still feel suspense even when we know the ending.
So we have a real puzzle on our hands.
We do.
Yeah.
But philosophers have come up with some pretty creative ways to try to solve this paradox.
And that's what we're going to explore. So solution number one, entertained uncertainty, comes from a philosopher named Noel Carroll. What's his take?
Well, Carroll basically says that we don't need actual uncertainty, just entertained uncertainty. He's saying when we watch a movie or read a book, we're kind of playing pretend in our minds. We're entertaining the idea that we don't know what's going to happen.
So even though we know the hero is going to survive, we can still imagine the possibility that they might not.
Yeah. Carroll draws on this idea called the thought theory of emotions. It basically says that we can have real emotional responses to things that we know aren't real. Like you can imagine your child getting lost and feel real fear, even though they're safe at home.
And so we can feel real suspense in a story, even though we know it's just a story.
Right. We're tapping into that power of imagination. We're letting ourselves believe, just for a little bit, that we don't know the ending.
Okay, that makes some sense. But I'm already thinking about all the times I've rewatched a movie and felt less suspense the second time around.
Yeah, that's one of the big problems with this theory. If entertained uncertainty is enough, then why does suspense fade with repeat viewings?
It's like the more familiar we are with the story, the harder it is to really believe that we don't know what's going to happen.
Right. And there's this great counterexample that really throws a wrench in things. Hitchcock's Psycho. Specifically, that scene in the office with Marion Crane and Norman Bates.
Oh, yeah, right before.
Right before the shower scene. Now, the first time you watch the movie, that office scene might feel a little weird, but you don't really know why it's important. But on a second viewing, knowing what's coming, that scene becomes super suspenseful.
Yeah, because you know Marion's in danger even if she doesn't.
Exactly. And that suspense isn't coming from entertained uncertainty. It's coming from our knowledge of the outcome.
So maybe entertained uncertainty isn't the whole story.
Yeah, maybe not. So that leads us to solution number two. Aaron Smuts's desire-frustration theory.
And this one goes in a totally different direction.
Totally different. Smuts says we don't need uncertainty at all. He says suspense comes from wanting to change the outcome of an event, but being powerless to do so.
So, even though I know Marion Crane is about to meet a terrible end, I still feel suspense because I want her to be okay, I want her to escape. But I can't do anything about it.
Precisely. Smuts points to documentaries like Touching the Void, where the audience knows the outcome but is still on the edge of their seats. He argues that fiction especially is great at creating suspense because we, as the audience, are completely helpless. We can't jump into the screen and save the day.
It's like in Rear Window. Jeff is stuck in his wheelchair, watching everything unfold, but he can't do anything to stop it.
Exactly. We feel that same helplessness. And Smuts even brings up video games, where they often take away your control at key moments to ramp up the suspense.
Okay, that's interesting. But I'm sure there's some holes in this theory too, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. One problem is that Smuts says the event has to be imminent. But he doesn't really explain why. What exactly does imminent mean? Another issue is that sometimes we feel suspense, but we don't really know what we want to happen. Like in Michael Clayton, when they're trying to put a tracker in his car.
Yeah, it's tense, but are we rooting for them to succeed or fail?
Right. It's not always clear what desires being frustrated.
It also makes me wonder if our desires in fiction are really the same as our desires in real life.
That's a good point. It's a whole philosophical debate about the nature of fictional desires.
Fascinating stuff. Okay, so the desire frustration theory is interesting, but maybe not perfect. What's next?
Next up, we have Richard Gehrig's moment-by-moment forgetting theory. Now, Gehrig actually agrees that we need uncertainty for suspense.
Oh, okay, back to uncertainty.
But his solution is to say that we effectively forget the outcome as we're watching or reading. Like we know how it ends, but our brains kind of push that knowledge aside so we can still feel the suspense.
So it's not that we're pretending we don't know. It's
Yeah.
that we genuinely forget in that moment.
Exactly. He even has an evolutionary explanation for this. He says that in real life, things never repeat exactly the same way. So our brains haven't really evolved to constantly remember the outcomes of things that have already happened. It's like we're hardwired to experience each moment as if it's the first time.
I don't know, that feels a little far-fetched to me.
It's definitely a tricky one. And there's some pretty strong arguments against it. For example, in a movie like Speed, the suspense builds slowly over a long period of time. It doesn't seem realistic to think that we're forgetting what's going on every few seconds.
Right. And we're pretty good at remembering things from the past, especially when it comes to things that are important to us. Like, if I almost got hit by a car, I'm going to remember that and be more careful crossing the street next time.
Exactly. And another problem is that sometimes we actually notice more things in a story the second time around, like foreshadowing or little details we missed the first time.
Like in that Hitchcock movie, A Shadow of a Doubt, you start to see all the clues about the uncle.
Right. And that means we're not actually forgetting the outcome. We're using our knowledge of the ending to interpret the story in a new way.
Okay, so moment-by-moment forgetting is a creative idea, but it doesn't seem to hold up under scrutiny. So what's the last theory we're looking at?
The last one is Robert Yanal's emotional misidentification theory. And this one is pretty straightforward. Yanal basically says, if you think you're feeling suspense when you know the outcome, you're wrong. You're just mislabeling your emotions.
So what am I actually feeling then, if it's not suspense?
Yanal says it's probably anticipation. Like you know what's coming and you're looking forward to it, even if it's something scary.
But how can we be sure it's a different emotion? If it feels the same, maybe it is suspense.
That's the main criticism of this theory. Yanal doesn't really explain how anticipation is different from suspense on a feeling level. It's more of a definition thing. Like he's saying suspense requires uncertainty, so if you're not uncertain, you can't be feeling suspense. But that doesn't explain why it feels the same way.
It's like he's saying, we've decided what suspense is, and if your experience doesn't fit, then you must be wrong about what you're feeling.
Yeah, pretty much. And this kind of logic can lead to some weird conclusions. Like we often feel fear watching movies, even though we know the characters are going to be okay in the end. Should we say that's not really fear because it doesn't fit the definition?
It gets really complicated when you start trying to define and categorize our emotions.
Definitely. And this all goes back to the idea that suspense might not be a single, simple emotion. Maybe it's more like a blend of different things. Fear, hope, excitement, and maybe even a bit of uncertainty, depending on the situation.
So 4 very different solutions to the paradox of suspense. each one challenging a different piece of the puzzle.
And none of them are perfect.
Hmm.
But that's what makes philosophy so fun, right? It's all about exploring these tricky questions and trying to make sense of the world around us.
And it's not just about the paradox itself. A good theory of suspense also needs to explain why suspense fades when we rewatch things, and why we don't feel suspense as much in real life as we do in stories.
Lots to think about.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into suspense, what are your final thoughts? Do any of these theories resonate with you?
I think it's just so cool how this seemingly simple question about suspense can lead us to these really deep philosophical issues about how our minds work. It makes you appreciate the power of stories and how they can tap into our deepest emotions.
Absolutely. It makes you wonder what other hidden complexities there are in the way we experience art and entertainment.
Maybe our enjoyment of suspense, even when we know what's going to happen, tells us something about our need for emotional experiences. Like we crave those feelings of fear, hope, and excitement, even in a safe, controlled environment.
Maybe that's why we love roller coasters and scary movies. It's a way to experience those intense emotions without any real danger.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder what other paradoxes are out there just waiting to be discovered in the way we engage with the world around us.
A great question to ponder. Thanks for joining us for this philosophical exploration of suspense. We hope you've enjoyed it.